Hey everybody, I'm Joe. We're doing another character build for the Marvel Multiverse game. Here we go. It is not always beneficial to compare one TTRPG experience to another, but stick with me for just a moment. If you have played Pathfinder or D&D, try to remember your first character or the table that you played at with your first campaign and other players' first characters. What would you estimate is the first character that most people play? In other words, what is, in your experience, the most common first class that people pick up? I don't have any hard data on this, but in my experience, the rogue is the most popular first class that players pick up. My first D&D table, where I was a player, was relatively large. It had 7 players, but we had no fewer than 3 rogues at the table. And time and again, as I have introduced TTRPGs to players, the rogue has been an incredibly popular first class. Now this makes a lot of sense. It's a fun gameplay style, sneaking past people, doing sneak attack, breaking into places, stealing things. It is a fun fantasy for you to live out, and I love the concept. So I have not done a character build for Marvel Multiverse since the full core rulebook was published, and I thought to myself, what should my first character be that I build with the full rulebook? Well, I've done a lot of damage dealing combatants or tank combatants, and those are great, and I'll have to redo them for the core rulebook. But if the most popular first class for other games is the sneaky thief who breaks into places, shouldn't I see what it's like to build that in this game? And that is exactly what we are going to attempt to do today. We are going to try to build a sneaky, almost scoundrel of a character. And the whole goal is not the combat orientation, though we'll shore up those aspects of the character later. I want to build somebody who can flawlessly break into places, sneak past people, get wherever he wants, steal anything he wants, and get out. What is the best that I can build? That concept in this game. Now, I don't know what you would call this character, and I have a hard time naming my characters, so for right now, we'll just call him the Sneak. At rank 1, we have an average size character with 25 feet of movement speed, and we're going to have 1 point of karma, and we already have a difficult decision to make. We have a difficult decision to make. When you attack somebody at arm's length, so you're attacking somebody that is within 5 feet of you, that is a melee attack. It doesn't matter if you think of it more as an agile or martial arts character or more strength-based. It is a melee-based attack. Agility attacks are attacks that are made at range. However, when you want to sneak past somebody, which is the primary thing we want to do, that is a check done using your agility score. This means if we want this character to be good at sneaking and melee attacks, we would have to put points into both of those stats. And it's going to be a little bit complicated as far as that goes. You see, the power set I want to rely on specifically has melee-based attack powers inside of the power set. They are done at reach, but we're going to be sneaking past people and using our agility score. And so we have a choice to make. We can bump up our resilience and our vigilance, and that's going to take away the points that we could potentially put into melee. We could also think about our secondary stats, our mental stats of ego and logic. Now, later in this character's career, I am going to be using a power set that relies on your ego score in order to make target numbers, which means I need to put a little bit of points into my ego so that my powers actually are reasonable. I also want to be able to do investigation checks once I've broken into a place to find what I'm looking for. As a result, I don't feel that I can actually prioritize my melee attacks. You might feel differently. You might want to build a character that does really good melee attacks, but that would necessitate dumping your ego or logic score on this character. And so, with the version I'm going to build, this is a character that does not use the melee attacks from his primary power set. It means I'll be making attacks that are not very effective and they will need to be with a ranged weapon, but it's going to make my other powers better later on. You might go a different direction with this character, but for me, I'll be dumping the melee stat. So I'm actually going to take a -3 point buy in melee. I'm going to put 4 points into agility, capping it at rank 1, and 2 points each into resilience and vigilance. At the moment, I'll be leaving ego and logic alone, but I'm going to leave logic pretty much at a 0 the entirety of this character's career, and eventually I'll be bringing up the ego score. This is going to give me defenses of 14s for melee and agility, 12s for resilience and vigilance, and 10s for ego and logic. Now, the 14 as a defense for melee is going to come about because of a power that we're going to take, so let's jump into the powers right now. The power set we are going to take at rank 1 is phasing. Phasing is a brand new power set. It was not in the playtest document, and it allows you to become intangible. And we're going to take phase self as our very first power. This allows you to become intangible and you can walk through walls. What better way of making somebody who can break into some location and steal things than making them able to literally walk through walls? Phase self is wonderful. We can take it right away at rank 1, and that's what we're going to do. The next power we're going to take is evasion. This is what I alluded to earlier. It allows us to use our agility defense as our melee defense number. So we still have no ability to do combat at close range, but at least our defense is reasonable. We're going to continue with the SAD powers, the single attribute dependent powers, and we're going to take wisdom. This does nothing for us at rank 1, but it's going to allow us to use our ego defense as also our logic defense going forward, which is nice. The last power we're going to take is accuracy. Accuracy gives us a +1 damage multiplier to any attack that uses agility. It also gives us a +1 to all of our non-combat agility-based rolls. Sneaking is an agility-based roll, so automatically we're getting a bonus to our sneaking. As we are getting this character up and running, we have to look at origin and occupation. When it comes to origin, which is how the character got his or her powers, I have no recommendations for you. Pick something that seems flavorful. So this one is Taster's Choice. But when it comes to our occupation, we're going to take the investigator occupation. This is going to give us an edge on all vigilance checks to spot clues and on logic checks related to interpreting those clues. I want a character who's not necessarily evil. I think of this character as somebody who's an investigator, who's trying to determine the truth. This is a character that's going to play very well in intrigue-heavy campaigns about evil organizations. And so I want somebody perhaps with a cool hat, wearing a trench coat, who sneaks through buildings and finds the clues and gets out with them. This character would have a double edge on these checks if he or she has access to a lab, but I will not be assuming that as we go forward. The trait we are going to take here at rank 1 is going to be sneaky, of course. This gives us a single edge on all checks to sneak past somebody and gives our enemies trouble on trying to detect us as we do the same. So how are we going to measure this character's output? It can't be in damage. I haven't even told you how we're making attacks yet. If we ever make attacks, we probably will have to from time to time. This is a character that breaks into places, sneaks past people, steals stuff, and gets out. So let's measure that ability. First, we have the sneaky trait, and that's going to give us +1 edge for all checks to sneak past people, and a 1 trouble for our enemies to be able to detect us. We also are going to have a +5 to the roll that we make. That's 4 from 4 points of agility and a +1 from the accuracy 1 power. When it comes to making attacks, I just assume this character has some basic, simple, ranged weapon, maybe a handgun of some kind. We're going to have that with us, and we're not going to do anything special with it for many levels, so whatever you want to do there, just make sure it's a ranged weapon. Let's take a look at rank 2. We're going to bring our agility to a 5, which is our cap for this rank, resilience to a 4, vigilance to a 3, and ego to a 1. This is going to give us 120 hit points, 90 points of focus, and defense is a 15 for melee and agility, 14 for resilience, 13 for vigilance, and 11 for ego and logic. It is going to become important as we continue with this character to understand how concentration works in this game. According to the core rulebook, you can concentrate on a number of abilities simultaneously that is equal to your rank. This is going to be important for us as we continue with this character because we will have concentration choices to be made. Phasing is a concentration power, and that's why we only had one concentration power at last rank, is we really didn't have the ability to utilize more than one at a time. But that is something we're going to start stacking at this rank. The power set we're going into at this rank is the illusion power set, and this is where this character comes together. In my experience, a concept of a character really gels at about rank 2, and this character is no exception. The illusion power set gives us a lot of things that we want. Eventually, it is going to allow us to create really cool illusions, and the difficulty of seeing through them will be based on our ego defense score, which is why we're bumping ego. But we're not using any of that yet. We're going to start down a path to make ourselves, well, frankly, better at sneaking. The first power we're going to take is illumination, which allows us to pick an object or a point and illuminate it. And maybe it will come in useful, especially if we are in a relatively dark environment. But really, we're just taking this power because it is a prerequisite for other things we want. The next power we're going to take is invisibility. Invisibility is essential on this character. It does exactly what you expect. We become invisible, but there are additional stipulations to invisibility in this game. The first important stipulation is that invisibility grants you an edge on all sneak checks. And that's going to be important for us because edges do stack. And so the edge from the sneaky trait is going to stack with the edge from invisibility. But there's more to the invisibility power in Marvel Multiverse. Specifically, invisibility also states that the only way that an enemy would be able to do a check to actually perceive us is if we are moving. Now that is going to be important for some of the things we're going to do later on, but the reasoning is sound. The reason that someone might be able to do a vigilance check to perceive us is if we are moving, we might make sound. And that brings us to our next power. The third power we're going to take is Silence Self, also in the illusion power set. You target yourself and everything you do becomes completely soundless. Now, let's think about the interaction with invisibility. As we said, invisibility grants an edge for sneaking past people, and they have trouble on any check to perceive us. These will stack with any other sources of an edge or trouble for these same checks. The invisibility power also states that we are really only able to be perceived when we are moving. This is implied that we would be perceived based on sound. So here's the question. Does Silence Self mean that people are not even allowed to make vigilance checks to perceive you if you are invisible and soundless simultaneously? The argument for this comes from the wording of invisibility, which I'll grant you is actually a little bit tricky to discern. It says it's even harder to spot things that are invisible but aren't moving. Characters must be actively trying to do so to be able to make a vigilance check. This implies that characters need to actually have a reason to try to perceive something that is invisible and not moving, because the movement might make sound. So, if we have a character that is soundless and invisible, there is an interpretation of invisibility that stipulates that enemies would have to have knowledge that an invisible, soundless person is around them in order to even make a vigilance check. Now, the argument against is just fair play, that the enemies would still be able to make the check just so there is a possibility of failure for the character. And I think that's completely reasonable and is probably the way that most narrators will rule. But there is an argument to be made that if you have invisibility and silent self up at the same moment, most characters don't even have the right to make a vigilance check. But we do have to make a choice here. Phase self, invisibility, and silent self are all concentration powers. At this rank, we cannot have all three up simultaneously. And so I'm going to be a little bit conservative when I rank the character at this rank, assuming that we don't have all of our edges stacked up at the same time. At rank 3, you'll be able to be intangible, invisible, and inauditory at the same moment. But right now, it's just 2 out of the 3. The last power we are going to take at this rank is Accuracy 2, which is going to give us another +1 to all agility checks and another +1 damage multiplier for any damage that is done using accuracy as our attacking stat. When it comes to the trait at this rank, we have an interesting rules combination. I'd like to talk through the argument here, and it's going to be up to interpretation for your narrator. I want to take the trait Free Running. I have made no bones about my love of the free running trait. I've talked about it in several videos. It stipulates that you get an edge on all checks made for movement actions. Now, that is all movement: flying, swimming, swinging on webs, running. And that means that you're just going to be better at moving quickly, following things, dodging obstacles, etc. However, let's come back to our understanding of sneaking past people when invisible. As we have explored, invisibility specifically says that checks are really only supposed to happen when someone is moving past someone and sneaking by them while invisible. So if you are invisible and you have the free running trait, does the edge from free running count towards the edge for sneaking past someone if you are actively moving? There is an interpretation of that rule that says, yeah, it is. As long as I am moving while invisible, free running grants an additional edge to that check. Your narrator might rule this differently, and it certainly does not apply if you are standing still. But if you're standing still and have silence self up, rules as written, people probably don't have the right to do a check to see if you're there anyway. So let's take a look at the edges that we are stacking. In an ideal world, we could have silence self and invisibility up simultaneously. We have the sneaky trait and potentially, while we are moving past people, an edge on that sneak check from free running. If all of those things add together, we get a quadruple edge. But let's say that we are going to have phase self and invisibility up at the same time. This is important for us because we're only rank 2. We can only concentrate on 2 things simultaneously. And I would take invisibility and phase self rather than invisibility and silent self much of the time. I'd rather be invisible and move through a wall to get away from somebody who hurt us, rather than invisible and silent but trapped in a room with somebody. So at this rank, I'm going to assume we only have 3 of our potential 4 edges or troubles that are happening in a sneak check. In this case, I might say that I don't have silence self up. And as a result of that, I would have a triple edge on sneaking past somebody, and those enemies would have double trouble on perceiving me. The numbers are different because we're counting free running as one of the edges, but it does not impose trouble on the enemy. If we take a look at that roll that I have triple edge on, I have a +7 to the roll, 5 from agility and another 2 from accuracy 2. I also have 30 feet of movement rather than 25 because of my agility score. Remember, every 5 points of agility buys you an additional 5 feet of movement speed. At rank 3, I'm going to get my agility to a 6, my resilience to a 5, my vigilance to a 5, and my ego to a 2. This is going to give me defenses of 16 for melee and agility, 15s for resilience and vigilance, and 12s for ego and logic. I'm going to have 150 points of health, and I'm going to have 150 points of focus. At rank 3, I am not going into any new power sets. Instead, I'm going to take 5 powers. The first one is going to be Sturdy 1. We have had no damage reduction this whole time. I've been relying on potentially being intangible and being able to get away from enemies when a fight breaks out and attacking from a distance. But I really can't rely on that forever. Sturdy 1 is going to give us 1 damage reduction. I'm next going to take Heightened Senses 1, which gives me an edge on discerning if somebody is sneaking up on me, and it gives enemies trouble on them trying to sneak up on me. So once I'm in a room searching for clues, if someone's coming up behind me, I'm going to be able to determine that they are there with more reliability. The next power we're going to take is Phase Walk. Now, the reading of this power indicates that you have to have Phase Self and Phase Walk up simultaneously as concentration powers. So please be aware of that. But the easy thing to do is if you use it, drop Silence Self, Phase Walk, drop Phase Walk, add Silence Self, because now we can concentrate on 3 powers at a time. But Phase Walk is amazing. It allows you to move freely in any direction. When we have Phase Self operational, it assumes we are walking on the ground like normal, but Phase Walk is going to give us the ability to simply float through the air or through water and move in vertical directions. So if we get to a building that has a compound several layers underground, we can Phase Walk vertically through those levels to arrive where we want, which is just going to give us some pretty amazing mobility. And we can do this movement at our normal movement speed, which for us is 30 feet. The next power we're going to take is Quick Phase. Quick Phase is a concentration power, but it assumes we do not have Phase Self up at the same time, and so it's probably going to be just fine for us to have. This is a reaction power. It is triggered when somebody targets us with an attack. We can spend 5 points of focus and as a reaction become intangible before the attack hits. This means that if we want to, we can simply fade out from being affected by anything in a battle. But please note, when you are phasing, you cannot physically interact with anybody else. It takes us out of being offensively capable in a fight. The last power we're going to take is Phase Object. I really needed this as soon as I feasibly could get it, which I feel is right here. Phase Object allows you to touch an object that is up to a number of sizes larger than you, than your rank, and then make it intangible as well. So far, if I break into some kind of compound and want to steal something, I cannot do it while phasing. I have to grab it and then move somehow back through the facility. But I don't have a great way of accomplishing that feat because I can't turn it invisible and I can't phase it, meaning my normal way of being able to sneak is turned off in order to steal an object. This is no longer true. I can now phase an object, grab it, phase myself as well, and move with Phase Walk out of the building as fast as possible. Even if people shoot at me while I am phasing, I cannot be harmed, but they would know that I am there. If I turned myself invisible, the object is still visible, which would be a little bit weird, but this is starting to set up the perfect infiltrator capacity. So Phase Object we're taking at rank 3. I am assuming now that since we can have 3 powers operational at a time, we can have Phase Self, Invisibility, and Silence Self. We have Sneaky and Free Movement. This means that since we can have 3 powers concentrating simultaneously, we're going to have a quadruple edge on all sneak checks. Enemies are going to have triple trouble trying to detect us. If we are in a room stealing something, we have 1 edge on hearing them if they're sneaking up on us, and they have a single trouble while trying to do the same. We also have a +8 to our sneak roll. This comes from 6 points of agility and 2 points from accuracy too. At rank 4, we're going to add even more cool stuff. So we're going to have an agility of 7, a resilience of 7, vigilance of 6, and ego of 3. This is going to give us defenses of 17 for melee, agility, and resilience, a 16 defense for vigilance, and 13s for ego and logic. We are going to have 210 points of health and 180 points of focus, which is really nice. The first power we're going to take is Heightened Senses 2. Now we have a double edge on determining if someone's sneaking up on us, and they have double trouble doing the same. This is just making us even better at our infiltrator role, and I love it. The next power we're going to take is Accuracy 3, so a 3 damage multiplier, but what we really care about is an additional +1 on all agility-based non-combat checks, and that specifically includes sneaking. I love it. We're also going to take Sturdy 2, which gives us a 2 damage reduction. This is maybe not really relevant. If you wanted to move other powers up first, you could do so because we are able to turn intangible as a reaction after being targeted with an attack. But if we wanted to be in the attack, having some damage reduction will be helpful. I know we haven't done anything for our damage at all on this character. We're going to start taking that at the next level, but I wanted to have some capacities therein right here at rank 4. What we really care about here is Extend Invisibility. Extend Invisibility allows us to touch an object and make it invisible. And so we are able to make something intangible and invisible at the same time that we make ourselves intangible and invisible. We would not be silent, but we could break into a place, make something invisible, make it intangible, grab it, and escape. And the only way that anybody could even potentially know we were there is by hearing us. And that we can fix at next rank. So this is an amazing thief, and it all comes online right about now. If you wanted Extend Invisibility at rank 3, you'd probably drop the Sturdy power to do it, but you could have all of that operational at that moment. The problem is you could not phase and be invisible at the same time. As a result, touching something and making it invisible and intangible at rank 3 is not really feasible, so I pushed this power combination back until rank 4, and that's my reason for doing so. We are also going to take Disrupt Electronics. This allows us to use our phase ability, touch a piece of electronics, and break it. You have security cameras inside of this place you're breaking into, no problem. You have computer banks that you need to no longer be operational, no problem. You're not harming people, but because of your phase ability, you can shut down the electronics in a space you've broken into, and I think this is absolutely essential for anybody who really wants to be the great infiltrator. The trait we're going to take at this rank is going to be Battle Ready, which gives us 30 points of focus. All these powers cost very little amounts of focus, but we're dropping one and using another regularly. As a result, I do not want to burn through my focus. I want to have plenty in the tank. And this is going to bring our focus up from 180 to 210 points. We should be good to go for a whole adventuring day, no problem. Taking a look at our calculations, we have a quadruple edge on sneaking. Enemies have triple trouble to detect us. We have a double edge on detecting them if they're sneaking up on us, and they have double trouble doing the same. Because of Accuracy 3, we now have a +10 to our sneak rolls. Let's do our point buy for rank 5. We're going to take Agility to an 8, Resilience to an 8, Vigilance to a 7, Ego to a 5. This is going to give us defenses of 18s for Melee, Agility, and Resilience, 17 for Vigilance, and 15s for Ego and Logic. We are going to have 240 points of health, and because of the trait we took at last rank, 240 points of focus, which is awesome. At this rank, you have a choice. You could add more utility, you could add more problem solving to the character, and just never do significant damage in any battle. I thought it was time to start weaving in at least a little bit of damage. And so we're going into a new power set here, and we're going to pick up ranged weapons. We've been using ranged weapons this whole time, we might as well get good at it. In order to make sure that our damage is as good as possible, we're going to take Accuracy 4. This is going to give us 4 damage multiplier for any ranged weapon, which we've been using this whole time. It also is our last additional +1 to our sneak checks. we are going to take Double Tap, a very simple power inside of ranged weapons. It allows us to make ranged attacks at an enemy within 2 spaces, and if we succeed, we are going to do regular damage and double damage on a fantastic success. But like with many of the powers in ranged weapons, we also will cause the bleeding condition, which is pretty nice. The next power we're going to take is Stopping Power. We make a ranged attack and it does normal damage, but on a fantastic success, we are then able to make an additional attack at the same target. So about 70% of the time, we're going to get to do 2 attacks on our turn. Not bad. The last power we're going to take at this rank is Headshot. We make a ranged attack with trouble against an enemy. Upon a success, they take double damage, and upon a fantastic success, they take triple damage. In either scenario, if the enemy suffers any damage, they are stunned for 1 round. Now, remember, this is trouble on the attack, but we're going to fix that with our trait. The trait we're going to take is going to be Signature Attack. Signature Attack allows us to pick 1 power that attacks or 1 weapon and automatically have an edge every time that we use it. We're going to take Headshot. As a result, we have 1 edge and 1 trouble when using Headshot. They cancel each other out, and now your Headshot is a regular roll. Since it's a regular roll, you'll be doing double damage all the time with your 4 damage multiplier. And so we finally put together, and it is very late, we have finally put together some really reasonable damage at this rank. I'm still not going to calculate for it and put it into my, my little description at the end of a rank, but it is good to note that you're going to be using Headshot all the time. Our edge and trouble does not change from last rank. Quadruple edge when sneaking past somebody. They have triple trouble to determine the same, and we have a double edge on hearing them sneaking up on us. They have double trouble on the same. But now, because of accuracy 4 and because we've added another point into agility, we now have a +12 to our sneak checks. Good luck finding us. It's also important to note that at rank 5, we can concentrate on 5 powers simultaneously. This means Phase Self, Silence Self, Invisibility, Extend Invisibility, and Phase Object can all be operational at the same time. We are going to finish this character off at rank 6, but before we do so, I'm going to tell you right now, we are not going to be taking one of our optional powers. Instead, I'm going to be using that for an additional point buy. So at this rank, I will be doing 6 points being added in. That's how I'm getting that number. We are going to cap agility at a 9. We're going to cap resilience at a 9. Our vigilance will be a 7, and we're going to cap ego at a 9. This is going to give us defenses of 19 for melee, agility, resilience, ego, and logic. We have capped our potential defense score for 5 of our 6 different traits. Lastly, our vigilance defense is still not bad. It's sitting at a 17. We are going to have 270 points of health. We are also going to have 240 points of focus. We're never running out of focus on this character. At this rank, we're going to go back to the illusion power set and add in the ability to make illusions. And now I want to distract people with illusions while I sneak by them. I really couldn't make this happen any earlier with the character without completely dumping the ability to add damage. And so you could make the argument that I don't want illusion powers on this character. I might want to add in just more ranged attack powers, and that is completely justified. If that's what you want to do, then you don't need to be boosting your ego score. The only reason we boosted ego score is the target number to see through your illusion is based on your ego defense score. So if you're not going to make illusions, I would be bumping the logic score, not the ego score. If you did that, then you would have taken the integrity power at rank 1 rather than wisdom, and we would wind up with the same defense scores. Since you would have boosted your logic score, you probably would have gone into the telepathy power set at this rank to be able to communicate telepathically with the other members of your team. It is based on your logic score, and so it would gel perfectly. Alternatively, you could have boosted logic but not taken any powers in a new power set and simply added to your ranged power set. You would have had a much easier time with any of the investigation checks that you've been doing. On the other hand, we have been boosting our vigilance score. Vigilance is used for the regular perception checks. And so just to notice things in a space, we have been boosting that capacity, and we have an edge on those checks as well. Depending on what your narrator calls for, one or other path might be fine. For me, I'm going to be taking the illusion power so that I can create things that I can use to sneak past somebody, and I'm relying on my perception skills with vigilance. You might rule this differently, go for it. There are alternatives to making a very viable character here. But either way, we are going to start making some illusions now. The first power we have to take is static illusion. This allows us to make an illusion that does not move and cannot be heard, but we're able to place it somewhere, and there's a lot that you can do with unmoving illusions, including hide yourself in some way or hide a door in some way. There's lots of stuff you can do here. The next power we are going to take is animated illusion. Now your illusion is able to move, but it still cannot make sound. There's a lot that you can do with this power also. But all of those were just there so we could take grand illusion. You can now make large illusions that can be heard and they can move, and this is going to open up a world of possibilities for you. Since we have plenty of focus and we are able to take all of these at the same time, I imagine you're going to be using the grand illusion power most of the time. We are going to take the kill zone power as our last power at this rank. Kill zone is going to be really cool. This is a reaction power triggered when an enemy moves. That's all they have to do is move, and we can shoot them doing normal damage or double damage on a fantastic success. Either way, we regain our reaction. So if another target moves, we can shoot them and regain our reaction. And therefore, every enemy that moves, we can shoot during the time that is not our turn, which is going to be amazing for us. Since we have taken a reaction power, that means the trait we want to take at this rank is going to be combat reflexes, which gives us an additional reaction. We are going to utilize our first reaction for kill zone, gain that reaction back, and utilize it as many times as we need. But the second that we're the target of an ability, we can quick phase ourselves and not be affected. Please keep in mind, once you have quick phased, you cannot use your reaction for kill zone because you would not be able to harm anybody. Here is an interesting question. If I make a grand illusion, does that grant me an edge on sneaking past somebody? This is something you're going to have to make a decision about and make an argument about at the table. But let's say that the argument is feasible, that you can make a grand illusion and that grand illusion will grant you an additional edge on sneaking past somebody. We will now have 5 edges on that check, assuming that we have silence self and invisibility up and sneaky, and we are moving with free running. The enemies are going to have triple trouble to detect us, and we will have a plus 13 on our roll, which is just going to be incredible. Lastly, because of the heightened senses powers, we have double edge on being able to determine if someone's sneaking up on us, and they have double trouble doing the same. So let's take a look at this character. This is fun. There is no building in the world this character can't get into or out of. They are the perfect spy. They're able to get to any part of a compound. Locked doors do not bother them, and no one knows that they have been there. This is going to be amazingly fun to play, and the fact that you just don't do significant damage in combat is a fair trade-off. You are a utility character. You also, by rank 4, are the perfect thief, which I adore. I want to play this character in game so badly. I think that it would just sing in a campaign that is very intrigue heavy, investigating evil enterprises heavy. But if your narrator runs a combat focused game, this is not a good character to play. So really have a conversation about what kind of a game is in front of you before you decide to build something along these lines. All right, that's the character and the video that I have for you this week. YouTube's literally made out of buttons. I hope you push some of them, and I'll see you next time. All right, peace.